Now it's time for Lefties Losing It, and I think we should start with one of our regular contributors to this segment. She's the MVP of Lefties Losing It, MSNBC's Joy Reid. And here she expresses surprise that Kamala Harris didn't pick Mark Kelly as her VP because he's so white.
And I thought she would go astronaut, keeping it real. He, to me, would have been the safest, most conventionally safe pick. White, super white, like, mayonnaise sandwich on Wonder Bread, white.
Can you imagine a news anchor describing a black dude with that sort of language? You'd be off air in a millisecond. Now, let's check in on some Kamala fanboys and girls. Why are they backing a woman who was 5 minutes ago called a political liability but is now some sort of a saviour? Let's hear from some of her biggest fans, starting with this young lass who identifies as a trans man that got pregnant and had an abortion.
Why are y'all voting for Kamala Harris?
I don't want to lose my rights. I'm a trans man and I'm gay and I have been pregnant and I've had an abortion before and I don't want to lose that. I'm afraid of not being able to be myself anymore because from what I've heard, Trump's America doesn't want me to look like this. So
your mum doesn't want you to look like this. And here is her friend who seems to think that Donald Trump is going to make piercings and tattoos illegal.
I'm very,
alternative,
and I feel like if Trump were to win, I wouldn't be able to express myself through my looks and everything, and wouldn't be able to have the piercings or the dyed hair or the tattoos that I want. I would be able to be myself, and my dad's very pro-Trump, and I'm just very
pro-Kamala.
pro-Kamala. Yeah, I don't,
That poor dad. Yep, low information voters with paranoid delusions seem to be overrepresented at these Kamala rallies. Let's hear some more, and great work, I should say, here by Taylor Hanson for these eye-opening interviews. Now, get ready to lose some brain cells.
They probably wouldn't have accommodations for someone like me, especially given that I like women as a woman. I want to keep access to my bank accounts. I would like to keep making money. I don't want to be some man's object. I really don't. It's the whole thing with Project 2025 is terrifying. I read through some of it and it was just insane. It's bad.
That is bad, that anyone allowed to vote could be that brainwashed and broken. But there's more, there's always more.
Why are y'all voting for Kamala Harris?
It's ridiculous how anymore it's really hard for people like us, like queer people, and it's just really hard for us to get rights. And with how the Republicans are handling everything, it's just putting more and more stress on us, basically taking away everything we have. And it's just important that we feel safe just even living here, because everyone's been wanting to leave the country. And this is the only chance we have to properly fix everything.
Goodness me, what can you say to that? If you allow leftist indoctrination to run unchecked, that's the end result, folks. But it's not just young women who are being swept up by the Harris Walls campaign. Check out these two.
Why are you voting for Kamala Harris?
Because she is the woman that we need right now.
Is there any specific policies or anything that really makes you vote for her?
I just believe in her. I believed in her when I lived in California, and I still believe in her now.
Because she's all about the middle class. She's like us, and Trump is bad. That's just...
Trump's bad?
She's everything we're looking for. She is. She's just everything we're looking for.
The cat ladies for Kamala, so can you kind of explain that to me?
Well, I think you got it right there. I don't need to go any further than that.
Are you a cat lady for Kamala?
I am a cat lady for Kamala, obviously.
And the Kamala Harris campaign was so impressed with this next fan that they posted this video to social media.
Who do you plan to vote for?
Kamala.
Kamala. And why?
I kind of just agree more with her policies that she has ideas for, and she's not a felon.
Yeah, that's what white dudes are for Kamala. That's what they sound like and look like. As for Kamala, she sounds great as long as she sticks strictly to the script written for her. And that's why they haven't allowed her to do any interviews or press conferences where she has to think on her feet. Indeed, they are so tightly controlling every word she utters that she started plagiarising her own speeches.
So good to be back in Michigan. Listen, let me tell you, I am clear. The path to the White House runs right through this state. And listen, I am clear. The path to the White House runs right through this state. I took on perpetrators of all kinds. I took on perpetrators of all kinds and had a summer job at McDonald's. I had a summer job at McDonald's. So hear me when I say, so hear me, Detroit, when I say, I know Donald Trump's type. I know Donald Trump's type. And are we ready to fight for it? And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win.
You know what? I think I prefer it when she plagiarizes Donald Trump.
Because when I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips.
On tips for service and hospitality workers.
Now, plenty more lefties losing it with my next guest, including the incredibly dishonest way the media is representing the presidential battle. Let's start with the Kamala rebrand. The far-left Californian from San Francisco is not only stealing Donald Trump's policy to eliminate taxes on tips, but she's now pledging to take on big corporations, including Big Pharma.
I will take on big corporations that engage in illegal price gouging, corporate landlords that unfairly raise rents on working families, and take on Big Pharma and cap the cost of prescription drugs for all Americans.
Joining me now is the Senior Editor-at-Large of Newsweek and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel, Josh Hammer. Josh, is she not already part of the Biden-Harris administration? Why isn't she doing this right now while they're in power?
Well, she would like you to think that she is not currently in power for purposes of her policies, but I guess she wants you to magically think that she has all the answers come January 2025. Look, this is Kamala Harris's fundamental problem right now, is that she is the sitting vice president of the United States, and she has been responsible, just as responsible, frankly, as Joe Biden for all of the policies and, as you point out, all of the non-policies that have been implemented or not implemented for the past 3.5 years now. She is responsible for the worst economy in decades, for a formal recession in 2022. She is responsible for the 9.1% annualized inflation rate that was reached 2 years ago in the summer of 2022. She's responsible for the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021 that made America look like a laughingstock. Wars in Russia, Ukraine, wars in the Middle East a tinderbox. I could go on, but Kamala Harris is responsible for the horrific policies of this current administration, and she is trying so hard to not talk about that. And the media, obviously, as you're well aware, Rita, is completely abetting this. They are not asking her about her actual track record. They are not bringing up the fact that she was the border czar, that she is singularly responsible more than anyone else in the entire administration for the absolute cataclysm of invading illegal aliens at the American southern border. But she's trying to have her cake and eat it too. And, unfortunately, the media, like I said, is letting her do it. So the onus falls on the Trump campaign to ask the actual hard questions and to try to break through this media-induced collective bubble around her. It's really quite a mess, honestly.
Oh, the media campaign is possibly more astonishing than Kamala's own campaign. And we know she's been, as you said, a disaster as the border czar. The media is trying to whitewash that record. But look at this clip from the last time she ran for president back in 2019, where the good senator pledged to close immigration detention centres if she ever became president.
I want to know, when you become president, would you be committing to close immigration detention centers?
Absolutely, on day one.
On day one, Josh, day one. Again, not seeing much blowback or scrutiny about those comments by Kamala Harris, but these comments are being often unearthed on X by citizen journalists.
Look, I mean, this is someone who, as you and I have discussed in the past, Rita, I mean, this is someone who in 2018, I believe the year was, compared ICE to the Ku Klux Klan here in America. This is someone who, when she was campaigning for
Yeah.
president in the year 2020, she said that she wanted to make illegally crossing the border not an actual crime punishable by time in prison or in a DHS or CBP facility, but rather just a mere slap on the wrist or a monetary fine at best. I mean, this is someone who comes from a border state, California, but in every position that she has ever held back in her home state in California, whether it was DA, whether it was Attorney General, whether it was U.S. Senator from that state, has done everything possible to abet the flow of illegal aliens coming across that very porous southern border. And certainly her time as Vice President of the United States, I mean, anyone who could even look even remotely objectively at the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border would deem that the past 3.5 years have been an unmitigated, catastrophic, capital F failure. And again, Kamala Harris is now trying to embrace this tough on border, tough on crime rhetoric. She's out there with all these ads in these heavily Hispanic southwestern states like Nevada, Arizona, states that are leaning Trump, saying that she is somehow like Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Arizona, that she's like a staunch border hawk. I mean, this is Soviet-style Pravda disinformation. I mean, they are just lying to you. I do not know how else to say it. So again, the question at this point is whether or not the voters in the swing states, including those two aforementioned southwestern states that I mentioned, Arizona, Nevada, are they going to fall for the lie, or is the actual record going to come up? And again, the responsibility for making sure that the conversation stays on the substantive issues and the track record, it, in theory, ought to be the media. They're not doing their jobs. What that means is that the Trump-Vance campaign has to break through that fog and to get the message out there. They have to remind the voters, remind them, the moderates, the independents, the swing state voters, just how terrible her record is, including on the all-important immigration issue.
And on Kamala's record as a prosecutor who puts away felons, that's something they've been very strongly pushing. She's some sort of law and order crusader. Well, we all know how that went in California. And one of the laws the VP authored could see a pedophile who raped and murdered an 8-year-old girl freed in a couple of months, Josh. This could be largely because of a law Kamala Harris authored when she was California's Attorney General. It hasn't received much coverage. This offender was under 18 when this offence took place. And under this law that has been authored by Kamala Harris, he could be released come October. Again, this seems to be disqualifying on its own, the manner in which she has contributed to the decay in California.
Yeah, look, I mean, Kamala Harris's track record when she was Attorney General of California, I mean, she single-handedly led the charge on multiple massive jailbreak pieces of legislation, very much including this one. She was a staunch defender of so-called juvenile justice, which results in horrific atrocities, much like this headline that the Daily Mail is doing a huge public service and actually trying to bring to the forefront of the conversation there. Look, personally speaking, I mean, as a lawyer myself, as someone who back when I was a federal law clerk here in Texas, I mean, I saw all sorts of horrific fact patterns, sex trafficking, human trafficking. I mean, my personal 2 cents on this is that if you are a bad dude, then you should be behind bars for the rest of your life. Essentially, period, full stop, end of story. Everyone has due process. You have your right to appeal. That's bread and butter, English common law stuff. But when you are a bad person, at a certain point, you do not deserve parole. You cannot be let out on bail. And I sincerely worry, actually, Rita, that there are even some people on the American right, actually, tragically, who have forgotten that. A lot of people kind of got swept up in the storm of criminal justice reform. You know, fortunately, I guess unfortunately, it took really the George Floyd riots of 2020 and skyrocketing violent and property crime rates, I think, for even of my fellow conservatives to kind of come back to a reality check here on this issue. But again, it's a very crucial issue for many swing state voters. Crime is typically the number 3 issue in most of our polls right now, behind the economy and immigration. And as long as it continues to be the case, it is yet another issue along with immigration that is ripe for the picking for the Trump-Vance campaign to prosecute the case, pun very much intended.
Now, we mentioned earlier that Kamala is so desperate for popular policies because there ain't too many policies on her official website that she's stealing them from Donald Trump. Let's have a look at that.
When I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips.
Eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
Oh, Josh, not only did the media not slam Kamala for brazenly stealing a Trump policy without any credit, but look at the way they report the story in their headlines. Take CBS, for example. This is how they reported the policy when Trump released it, highlighting that it will cost the government $250 million over 10 years, according to a nonpartisan watchdog group. But this is how they reported it after Kamala stole the policy and announced it. Vice President Kamala Harris is rolling out a new policy position, saying she'll fight to end taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers. Media bias? What media bias, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, that's just unbelievable stuff right there. I mean, CBS News, bear in mind, Rita, is the exact same news outlet that for about 2 to 2.5 years, if I have the time frame right, insisted over and over again that the Hunter Biden laptop story was just Russian disinformation. And eventually CBS News buried in like the 8th or 9th paragraph of some unrelated article. They did a mea culpa, like, shh, you know what, our bad. Actually, it was a legitimate laptop there. So, you know, this is CBS, like most of the other major networks here. I mean, ABC News, one of CBS's major competitors, ABC News has George Stephanopoulos as their lead political anchor. This is someone who literally ran the Bill Clinton campaign in '92. So, you know, these hacks definitely are not hiding it. Look, I mean, I'm not surprised that Kamala Harris is a plagiarist when it comes to policy, because her 2020 running mate, Joe Biden, was actually an admitted plagiarist back when he was in university. He was very much accused and then ultimately decades later admitted that he was a plagiarist. I can't remember if it was in college or law school. So plagiarism seems to run very much in kind of the Democratic Party DNA at this particular point there. But ultimately, it's kind of a refresher here that it's very difficult to kind of out-pander the Democrats, even if you try to kind of put a sound policy into place to try to help out some blue-collar people amidst this Bidenomics terrible economy. The Democrats have no shame whatsoever. They're gonna try to just double you, triple you, quadruple you up, trying to basically just pander to as many people as possible. That's how they buy votes. That's how they win elections, unfortunately.
Now let's talk about Tim Walz. The Harris campaign is desperately trying to silence rumours that he campaigned on stolen valor. A campaign spokesman, though, has admitted to CNN that the governor misspoke. I love that term, misspoke, when he talked about his time in combat. Here is a little bit of the governor misspeaking.
Sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Carrying weapons of war. Now, Battalion Commander John Kolb, who ran Walz's former unit, is accusing the VP nominee of misrepresenting his rank in the military. Walz has claimed he reached the rank of Command Sergeant Major with the National Guard, but that doesn't appear to be the full story, Josh.
No, it's very much not. And you know, look, Tim Walz is obviously a liar. I mean, he should be thanked for the service that he actually held, but he should not be thanked for service that he egregiously and falsely claimed that he held, that he did not actually do. You know, and the craziest thing, to kind of yet again go back to media bias, which I guess is kind of our leitmotif of the show, but to kind of go back to that, the media has been juxtaposing Tim Walz here in America as this great military hero while they're doing that side by side with J.D. Vance. You know, you'd be hard-pressed to find any mainstream media article here recently talking about J.D. Vance's own military service. J.D. Vance served in the Marines in Iraq. Unlike Tim Walz, he was actually there. He signed up to defend his country overseas during the height of the war on terror, unlike the guy on the other side of the ticket. So, you know, this side-by-side comparison is really remarkable if the media actually wants to tell the correct story there. But, you know, politically speaking, I'm wondering if this whole stolen valor story, and it very much seems to be outright an objective, egregious even stolen valor, I have to wonder if this is going to play in those Midwestern states in particular, those Rust Belt states. There are a lot of veterans in these states, you know, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, there's a disproportionately large percentage of U.S. military veterans in these states. If there was any demographic, any voting group out there who ought to and really should take offense at this egregious act of stolen valor, it is veterans who actually did decide to fight and risk dying, frankly, for the country. So we'll see if it pays political dividends. But again, yet again, the media is doing their best to fluff it up and pretend like there's no big deal. But there is very much a very big deal here.
Oh, absolutely. This is an issue people care about. But you're right. If you Google this topic, the top search results are almost all gaslighting us. They're almost all presenting Walz as some war hero who's any questioning of his record is fake news. And then there's all sorts of question marks over Vance, who was actually there and who signed up to be there, as you said, at the height of the battle. Now, it's not just the American media acting as the Democrats' propaganda arm. Our own Nine papers, have claimed the nickname Tampon Tim, which has been trending on X, levelled against Tim Walz, is actually backfiring because it highlights Walz's effort to combat period poverty by putting free menstruation products in Minnesota public school bathrooms. Now, somehow, Josh, in this piece that ran for some 1,000 words, the author missed the key point. The fact that Walz is mocked as Tampon Tim, not because he made tampons available for girls, but because he put tampons in boys' bathrooms in schools across Minnesota. I mean, I don't know how you write 1,000 words and somehow miss the key point, but that's the Australian media for you, Josh. Not much better than what you've got in the US. Thank you again for your time this evening. It's always a pleasure.